Test Trains. This is a video where we're going to start to build mountains, and it's going to be kind of geared toward the beginner. It will have a few possible advanced techniques. But as far as the material that we're going to use, we're going to need styrofoam, possibly some plywood, and what we're going to cover the mountain with is a material called Sculptamold, and that can be bought at Scenic Express. So in starting, before we get to the materials and start cutting and all that, we're going to need some type of plan. So this is a side view of the mountain. This is what is basically in my mind right now, and we're going to need to cut out a base, and that would be this piece here, and then a mountain shaped back area. This is going to be our tunnel right here, so we'll need to cut out a tunnel. Again, this is a side view. This is looking on. This tunnel is running this direction. And what I'm envisioning in my mountain is a separate track running across the top. So we're going to need a structure to support that. And then in front of all this will be the mountain shape. So that's our basic mountain plan. But since we're in the pre-construction stage, we're going to need possibly some wires running here for the track. And I'm going to run a second set of wires up here at the top, because I don't know, I might put an accessory on there such as a beacon rather. And in this section right here, what I'm envisioning is a strobe light, so I'll have to run a couple more wires. And what that strobe light's going to do, I'm envisioning a lightning effect on possibly a forest down below. So that's our plan. That's what's in my head right now as far as a preconceived notion, and we'll see how it turns out. So let's get started with the first couple of steps. So at this point I wanted to dive right into this, so I rough sketched the shape of what I think this mountain's going to look like. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to get a sharp blade, and the sharper the better, hopefully a new one. And we're going to rough cut the shape of this mountain out. And you're thinking, wow, this guy must have missed a couple of steps here. But what's actually going on, these pieces are just sitting there. And the only piece that is secure is this piece here. And the reason I started this way is just easier to take the pieces off rather than to put them on. So this is our rough put together structure here, the way it might look after I'm all done. So let me mention this piece here is supported with really cheap barbecue or Kinchin shish kebab skewers. You can get these at the supermarket for about 99 cents. This area here is for that strobe lightning effect that I talked about earlier. And this time of year you can pick up some nice effects that are in the supermarkets or the Halloween stores. And that's what I'm actually going to end up using. It's a lightning effect for the house, but I think it'll work well for this application. Over here I've got a bunch of end cuts. Those are going to come into play later. If there's an area that I don't like the way it's looking, I'll just throw some more styrofoam on there and then cover it with the Sculptamold that we're going to use. These pieces over here are actually cut from these four pieces on the inside, and I'll show you that in a minute. They're not needed for structural support, so you can actually get some more styrofoam to use if you engineer. So that's it. We're going to start taking apart the pieces with a closer camera angle so you can see just what's going on inside there. So I'm going to take some of these pieces away, and bear with me here. So we'll take this piece off, and next comes off. I did secure this with a skewer. Okay, so we're taking these off. Now, let's see here. Okay, see how these are cut? This is the styrofoam that I just mentioned, saving some of the styrofoam to not needed. But since we're down to the actual tunnel part here, and we could just start gluing this, but there's a few things that we need to do. Let me mention this also. This styrofoam, these little X's here are actually measurements. This is a straight line all the way across. So it's good to cut your piece, then pull off the covering. because these are actually a guide. You can actually make a square, or if you need to, you know, judge your straight lines, these are actually, you know, measured off straight and square. So that's nice. And drop these. This is going to be the inside of the tunnel, obviously. But rather than just gluing it together, because a little bit of planning, in the future, you might want to mount a GoPro to a camera car, and in my series of O-gauge tools, I'll show you what I use. So once you put this together, you won't be able to get into it. So what you want to do is either texture it, paint it, or just paint it, whatever your thoughts are on that. But you want to do it now before you glue it together and try to get a paintbrush in there and upside down and all that. If you so have a mind to run a camera on your train, but they do make very interesting videos, and sometime in the future I'll make one. And if you wanted lights in the tunnel, this is the time to do it. I might actually, that's a good thought, maybe I'll add a light strip in there. I don't even need to hook it up. I want to have it in there just in case I do. I'm going to texture this with probably a soldering iron, just give it like rock figures, and then I'll probably paint it a gray or a brown to make it look like a rock inside a tunnel. And then, since we are going to run a camera through these, I'm going to fill this in and actually have the same kind of texture. This was textured with a blowtorch, just a propane torch. You could get like I stated before, with a soldering iron or a lighter, you can get that texture, but because it was bigger, I decided to use a propane torch. These are the arches. So this is the way it comes. And on the back here, I filled it with the leftover styrofoam, and then I covered it with a Sculptamold. And I put a pattern, I'll try to get it close up, into the Sculptamold, and that's why it's really good stuff. This was just watered down gray, and I went over it again with just some black paint that I watered down, and gets in all the cracks and crevices. So that's how I got that color. Just covered this with some brown water-based paint, and let me get these out of the way. I got the other side textured, but I talked about a light strip, so I went to Walmart, of all places, and they have these little kits for like a Christmas village, and it's got 3 positions. It's got solid on, flashing, and then there's a third setting where it's fade in, fade out, and a couple of bucks. Battery operated, takes 3 AA batteries. So I thought it was a pretty good deal. Not exactly prototypical of a railroad, but still going to add some interest into my tunnel. And this is what it looks like. It comes like this, and so I'm going to put this together, and I'll probably put some granite ballast in there and a piece of track as well before I close it up. This side of the tunnel has been glued with white glue, and the arches I used Gorilla Glue on them. I thought that might hold a little bit better with the plastic versus the styrofoam. I put a bead of silicone glue back here just to hold those lights in at a certain distance, so when you look down the tunnel they're somewhat in a row. This is the roof or the ceiling or the top part of the tunnel, and again I textured it with the torch and then painted it a water-based gray, and then kind of put some darker highlights. So this will fit right on top of here, and then this next layer will fit right on top. And I pre-glued the one side, but I wanted to show you just how it's done. It's not a big deal. Just take some white glue wood barbecue skewers, shish kebab skewers, and we're gonna put it right in like this. I want this to be, just gonna clip it off, a pair of diagonal cutters. And there's the next top layer. It's going to go right there. And then this will fit right on top. And then I got a piece of plywood. This is just added strength. So it's coming along. And next we're going to run some wires. Also, let me show you the lightning piece. Let me turn the volume up. I got this piece at, I believe it was Home Depot. And the further out you get, the bigger the lightning gets. And again, this piece is going to fit right up inside here. I made these up just to show this can actually fit inside the tunnel. And if you want a tunnel that looks a little more rustic, or you got a Western theme going on, you just stain these, maybe a light stain so they can see them inside the tunnel. I ran some wire, got the wire ran to the top for maybe an accessory. Coming along here, going and then back through behind here, and then straight down. And also have another wire coming up, and that is right here, and that's going to be for the track up on top. Now at this point I could decide to go with granite spires just shooting up, but it's not really going to allow me a whole lot of areas to put pine trees. So just because I laid the styrofoam in the horizontal position doesn't mean that I can't go and put in even a different angle of rock. There's no way to make a mistake here. I want to mention the lightning sound effect. It's not exactly working perfectly like I had thought, so I'm going to have to take this apart, and the reason being is there's a speaker in this piece. So if I put it in there, it's going to definitely muffle the sound. So I'm going to have to remote the speaker up here, maybe into a little shack or something, to camouflage it. And also, I think if I take this apart, there's three lenses in here that give the three different lightning effects. So I think it'll be even smaller, so it'll be a little easier to conceal. Styrofoam cutter, and this is going to be used quite a bit here. And I need to cut this piece off. And all you do is plug it in the wall, obviously. It's a real simple device. You pull the trigger, actually push the trigger on top, and then you just cut the styrofoam slowly, and it burns it and cuts it at the same time, and comes off just like that. So from this angle you can see I've got the arch, I've got two tracks. They've got wire going from the track through the styrofoam to the outside. I've got the Woodland Scenic ballast laid down here. I have that secured with the Scenic cement. So hopefully you can kind of see what's going on. I've got the area back here and an area back here, and that's where all the wires are going to the outside, and I cut a square here at the bottom. So at this point, let me turn it on to the other side of the panel. Show you the wire. So got the wire running here, and I secured that with silicone glue. Now silicone glue doesn't take well to other types of glues or the Sculptamold, because it's got like a smooth surface that nothing will adhere to. So we're just gonna block that out with some styrofoam and work on top of the styrofoam instead of the silicone. One thing I wanted to mention. I'm building this in a room that has a door. It's a certain width, and just luckily this fits through the door. So Something else to keep in mind, if you're building one of these, make sure you can get it out of the room you're building it in to the garage or wherever your layout's at. So this is how the whole thing is really done and put together. Wanted to show a little detail here. So I need a piece to fit right in there, so I've marked off a piece of the styrofoam. I'm going to cut it with the styrofoam cutter. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, it does have to fit though. So I'm just going to cut it right off with the styrofoam cutter. And pick up the piece. So, not too bad. So now, I got to cut a notch out of this. So we're just going to wing it here and see where we're going to end up. Well, I know that seems like, wow, he planned that, but anyway, that was all just freely done. So I got a piece here. I'm going to have to glue it, but also because I've got this space here, I'm going to have to put a little bit of gray paint right here to match the inside of the tunnel. I already did that piece. So let me do that. So got the and I'll be honest, in my planning I didn't account for this. What I should have done is not ran the texture all the way to the end of this piece, and I want to have that opening. So my bad. I'm just going to fit that right in there, and again I can texture this later, and I'm going to drive a piece right in. Now, I don't want to drive it in down here or even close to this area. So, but I do want it strong. For this application, I'm going to use Elmer's glue. This white glue. I've been trading off between white glue and wood glue and Gorilla Glue, and they all seem to work pretty well. So any of those will probably work for you as well. And just a little bit of glue, and maybe some right here. And as I said in other videos, I like to overbuild stuff so it's really strong. And this being a modular piece, I can take it off my layout with pretty good confidence that it's going to be able to last. Okay, so you put the wood dowel in there and just clip it off. And I can even run another piece up here. And just push that in all the way. And that's probably going to be plenty strong. Because all this has to do is hold the Sculptamold. And when the Sculptamold dries, it will encase all this, and it actually is a very strong material once it dries. Now this whole area has been covered in the Sculptamold, but I will show you here in a minute on covering another area. But I just wanted to show at this point how hard this is. And this was that styrofoam that we had in the last section, and now it's all covered, dried, and it's pretty much, I would say, rock solid. So turning this around, this is the area that we're going to cover right now, but before I get to that, I want to kind of bring an update of this section. I'm not into secret panels, but I figured this might need an access panel, so that's what that's about. And I did run into a bit of a problem, and I'll show you here in a minute. So that's the sound I got from the speaker, but it was a lot louder in the covering that it came with. But hopefully you can hear the difference. So that, it's not a big deal. Like I said, I'm going to remote this speaker up here, but I am going to have to build probably something else to magnify that sound. So that's another unforeseen thing that occurred, but we can work around it. So let's get started. Oh, also, this whole thing is pretty light, even though it's getting a little heavier, but you know, it's liftable and with not too much effort. But the good thing about the modular system is if I needed to turn this whole thing sideways to work on it, I could. It just makes it a lot easier than working out at your layout and having to climb over stuff and possibly breaking telephone poles or whatever you got, where this section can just be lifted and set into place and you work on it somewhere else. So that's another reason why I like the modular system, let's just say. So let's get started on this part. All right, so it's always good to have some paper towels on hand. I've got a bottle of water, and it's going to be important to kind of measure how much water we use for the first batch. That way additional batches will know exactly how much water to put into the Sculptamold and mix it up. I use disposable coffee cups because you get about maybe 3 or 4 applications before the crud builds up inside there. So, but what I'm going to be using is a clear cup. I'll fill it up with a amount of Sculptamold I think I'm going to be able to use in the time before it starts to dry up a little bit and get hard. So each time I can kind of measure, see how much Sculptamold versus water, and it'll make my job go a little quicker. Sculptamold's back here, and at this time I'm going to put some rubber gloves on because the Sculptamold's a lot like plaster, and it if you get on your hands, it dries it out. If you don't have rubber gloves and that ends up happening to you, working hands is good to moisturize your hands. It's a good product, and it replenishes your natural oils in your skin. That way you don't get those little cracks and stuff around your fingernails. So, and let me get the Sculptamold out here. And, oops. That dust from the Sculptamold is actually glue, so you want to keep that to a minimal. Anyway, the Sculptamold looks like this. And we're going to put some of that into our cup. And that's about the amount that we're going to work with, right about here. So we'll start mixing it up with the water. And I try to keep the mixed part on top till it soaks down, keeps a lot of that dust inside. So we can kind of see it mixing a little bit. Okay, so we got that mixed up. So it's okay, it does adhere to the smooth styrofoam. But if you needed to put a texture in there, you could get a soldering iron, put some ridges in there to just give it something else to grab to, or some toothpicks. So we're just going to apply it right here like this. Gonna run it up, get this out of the way, and keep my cup underneath it from any pieces that drip off. I'll catch. And just keep running it right up. And I start from the bottom up. I don't think there's any rules or laws or anything, but that's just the way I do it. And you can come back later. Right now it's pretty wet, but I want to mix it into the Sculptamold that I already have. So I'm just going to keep working this. That last section I showed you took about 1.5 hours. Okay, so I've used up my first cup of Sculptamold. I got about this much of an area, and so I just spackled it on. So at this point, I'm going to kind of let the spackle dictate a little bit of my terrain that I'm going to, you know, put the details on with. I see it kind of going this way, and I got some here, so I'm just going to use that and smooth it off a little bit and kind of add some terrain texture in there. This is great stuff because if you want to get really detailed, you could just start putting a bunch of little lines in there, and looks like rocks that are compressed millions of years ago or thousands of years ago, depending on your point of view. And when the erosion broke it away, and you can kind of see some of that, you can kind of put some of that detail in. So, and then on the area that where the dry Sculptamold is, you kind of work it in with your finger a little bit. So, so when that dries, it all becomes, you know, like a nice solid piece. Now this is completed and it's dried. Had about 2 days, 48 hours worth of drying time. So you can kind of tell it'll turn like nice and white. Moving over to the access panel, got my holes dug out for the lightning effect to come through, and I messed up and I made a fourth one, thinking that I needed that. So this material here, this is drywall tape, and it's got a light adhesive on one side, and it's, I guess, made out of fiberglass, so that can be used to reinforce this whole panel here. So I'll put another longer strip over that. So looking on the inside of it, first time I used heat glue. So I used the drywall tape and used heat glue to reinforce this whole piece. And what I found out is that, of course, like I thought the heat glue, and it did, melt into the foam a little bit, but once it set up and cooled off, the foam and the heat glue actually looked like it became one. So it actually is pretty sturdy. This is the volume control for the thunder effect. And I mounted that up here with, again, with the heat glue, and it seemed to be pretty solid and hold pretty well. And I remoted the speaker up on top, so let's move up there. For the speaker, I went through my parts bin, and I found a Lionel diesel shed. So I thought, you know, what the heck, be easier than making one, and I can use a part that sits around forever. I elevated these sheds so the sound can come out of the bottom rather than being muffled by the shed, but nothing but a piece of styrofoam here. And again, the speaker had to be mounted to something to magnify the sound. So that's what I came up with here, and I had the extra wires. We'll put a light inside the shed in front of the speaker. So that's what we got for the speaker. Now, before I get to this part, I did mention I was going to show you another material, and what you need to do, or what you can do, is get a cardboard box and cut it up into pieces, and you would heat glue the bottom here and form it into whatever mountain shape you wanted, you know, something like that. And then the material is called plastic wrap, and it's a sheet of plaster in there, and you peel it out, get the size that you need, soak it in water, and then put it over whatever formation that you made. I just wanted to show you just another method in addition to, or to replace the Sculptamold. But again, it's plaster based, and again, it's so much more messier than Sculptamold. But I did want to, you know, there might be an application. What we're going to do, actually, let me show you this. The wire that I said maybe someday I'll put something up here. Again, I don't know, but I want to have the wires there in case I wanted to put a microwave tower or something. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to put some heat glue on these and then tack them with toothpicks, and then we're going to cover this whole area in Sculptamold. right here I put some vertical lines, and that's going to simulate the drilling and the blasting out of the rock. So we got a railroad coming through here. So we're going to finish up this side here, the other side of the tunnel, and I got a different lighting to maybe show a little bit better the terrain and the different relief features of the Sculptamold. So looking at this area here, I decided that I'm going to actually make this kind of one piece instead of like spires like these are. So like I mentioned earlier, you can just take some spare parts. So I'm working on the bridge section here, and got a straight piece tracking across, and I got a little indentation for the bottom of this MTH bridge. So I'm going to screw a track in and work on this side and then work on the other side. That way it'll be straight. We're at the last step here of using the Sculptamold to complete the mountain. Let me show you how I prepped this. I put toothpicks all over this piece here that comes off to give the Sculptamold just a little extra something to grab onto, because this piece will be moved in and out, so you want it to be a little stronger in this area. And then around the edges I put shipping tape so I can bring the Sculptamold right up to it without any fear of it adhering to the existing dried Sculptamold. So this is going to wrap everything up, so let's get started and we'll finish this section. So the mountain's all dried rock solid, and let's just go over a few things. We got our two bridges going straight across, and we got our little cabin up here. This is the access panel, and it's really tight. So this is our volume control. And the cabin up here really didn't cover up any of the sound or muffle it. Again, I elevated that, let the sound come out underneath. And we'll put our access panel back. And again, it's really tight, and it fits right in there like that. And we'll cover up, there's a seam here, but we can cover that up with trees and plants and whatever have you. Now, you might have noticed one other thing in the video, and that's this right here. And what this serves, what this actually does, it's a dust cover. And again, it's all about planning. So if you plan to put a strategic hole in your layout that this can fit into, when you're all done, if you're not going to be operating your layout for a while, you can put these in, put the dust cover over it. That way it protects your trees and your telephone poles. And the dust cover rides on this instead of your layout. And got a little plug hole here, and that'll fit right in the hole. Could put a tree on top of that just to like spot it. It's like that's where that hole is, so I need to take that out and put this right in. So that's it. And I just want to thank you for watching my channel. And if you please subscribe, it really helps out a lot. And again, that way, if you're a subscriber, when I post a new video, it'll pop up and you'll see it and you'll be alerted. So thanks again for watching.